To be present with us along with other members of our town staff. And we've looked at some of the issues with the McCaslin corridor and trying to move forward with some of the plans that were talked about and approved back when the transportation plan update was approved by both the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees back in 2014. Specifically what we were focused on was the area here between Colton Road south to 128. And what I think we've all observed is that it appears to have been quite a significant increase in traffic over the course of the past 3 to 4 years since the transportation plan was adopted. We don't have hard numbers on it, but it looks as though, consistent with what we're seeing in other parts of the town, traffic counts are actually already at a point where we had previously expected them to be at around 2035. So it doesn't appear to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse. So with that in mind, we really embarked upon this path of looking at, well, what can we do? You know, what would make the most sense? And I don't want to speak for Alex, and you correct me if I do, but I think one of the things we all concluded was that the best thing we could do to address this is to move forward with the design and construction of the roundabout that was called for at Indiana and McCaslin. The premise here is that with traffic coming northbound off of 128, that's an 18% grade from 128 down to Colton Road. A lot of the times we're seeing traffic hitting what look to be some fairly high speeds, particularly as they're approaching Indiana there. And the idea, as you might recall from the transportation plan update for the McCaslin corridor in general, was to basically bookend on McCaslin entry into the Superior area. And the concept was that there would be one bookend would be the roundabout that we now have here at downtown Superior, the other bookend being the one down here at Indiana and McCaslin. So that's ideally where we want to get to, and we want to get there sooner than later. Of course, construction of a roundabout is not a cheap item. I think we're estimating at around $1.5 million to get something like that built. And we understand it's going to take some time to work that into the capital improvements budget for the town. But what leads us here tonight more immediately is, we've tried to look at, well, what can we do in the meantime, knowing that it may be, this isn't going to happen overnight. So what are some of the options? And again, brainstorming amongst ourselves, talking with Alex and town staff, what we've come up with are really two intermediate steps, and we call it low-hanging fruit. And the reason we call it low-hanging fruit is because it's fairly simple, it's fairly quickly implemented, and it's fairly inexpensive. And one would be to lower the speed limit. I think we suggested lowering the speed limit from its current 45 to 35. That might seem fairly slow, but given that the traffic coming down off of 128 in a 45 zone, we think is probably hitting 60 to 65. We feel that lowering the speed limit is advisable. It would help us a great deal in managing the safety issues along McCaslin. The other thing we're suggesting is, and I think we're considering this as part of kind of a retraining or re-education process of northbound motorists on McCaslin. And we're suggesting the installation of some radar speed limit signs, similar to what we currently have already. I think there's one right about in here that's facing southbound traffic. We're advocating installation of at least one radar sign right in about here in between 128 and Indiana. Talking with Alex, of course, we would defer to town staff and engineering and you folks on how many radar signs would be warranted. But I think we advocated budget up to 6, just so that town staff has the ability to install where engineering thinks it's appropriate. So that's really what we're here to ask for tonight. Approval of our recommendation regarding lowering of the speed limit, and approval of our recommendation regarding the installation of radar speed limit signs, knowing that we're going to be, and you see several members of our planning commission here tonight, I think most or all of us are planning to be a part of the town budgeting process coming up next week, and we do plan to address the issue of the roundabout and make the case that we think is warranted for moving forward with working that into the town budget. But that's what we're here for tonight. So, can answer any questions that you guys might have.
Sure. Jim, thanks for coming here tonight and for giving the presentation. I think the low-hanging fruit absolutely makes sense. I don't have a problem dropping the speed limit down to 35, seeing how that goes. It's inexpensive. I don't have a problem with the radar signs. I'm curious about the problem on McCaslin. Is the problem a traffic, an amount of traffic? Is it a volume problem? Is it a speed problem? And if it's a speed problem, which is what it sounds like it really is, and I mean the volume is there, but the topography of the slope is causing people to go faster than we want them to. I don't see how a roundabout really addresses any of that, other than we have a lot of roundabouts here in town. Some people like them, some people don't like them. I certainly understand the ease of flowing through an intersection and avoiding a light, but I don't see how a roundabout in that location helps the traffic, the speed of the traffic that's going on in McCaslin.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark, and once again, Alex, you correct me if I'm wrong. Alex, in case anybody's unaware, is kind of an international expert on roundabouts. He's published widely on the use of roundabouts as traffic management tools. To answer your first question, Mark, I think it is a speed issue, probably more so than a volume issue. There's no denying that volume is picking up. The metro area is much busier today
Sure.
than it was yesterday, and so on. But it really is a speed issue. I think the current thinking, and this really does go back to all of the public outreach and hearings and so forth that went into development of the transportation plan update and the idea of putting a roundabout there. As I recall, and I think we're looking at an excerpt of the transportation plan update right here that shows the corridor. I think the premise was that having a roundabout here, it's going to slow traffic. I mean, you can have people who will ignore the speed limit and ignore the radar signs and everything else, they're not going to ignore a roundabout, right? They're going to have to slow as they enter the corridor here to get around the roundabout. One thing I learned through the process, and again, this goes back 3+ years, as we were looking at different traffic management options, is that roundabouts, while slowing the flow or slowing the speed, actually improve the flow. And again, Alex, you check me if I'm wrong on this, but that was one of the things, one of the takeaways that came as a bit of a surprise to me. Because one would think, hey, why not just put a stoplight in there or something like that? But actually, stoplights aren't as effective as roundabouts. I think that case studies show that in terms of both moving traffic smoothly and slowing it down.
Right. So, I get it if you're coming off of 128th and you come to McCaslin, and then where McCaslin hits Indiana there, if you put a roundabout there, obviously you're going to slow people who are continuing on McCaslin. Do we have any data on the speeds that people are getting clocked on the stretch between 128th and Indiana versus Indiana down to Colton?
I'm sure the 85th percentile is probably over 55. I mean, it's probably substantially over the speed limit. I probably have data that the office, but it's probably. And just to piggyback on what Stuart said, I think within a quarter mile, that zone, probably an eighth of a mile on either side of the roundabout, you're going to have some slowing the speeds. And then with two roundabouts, you're not going to zoom, going northbound. You're not going to get up to 60 again. You're going to get so that stretch, you probably get compliance in those speeds. Oh, sorry. Got it. So on and we would post the roundabout like we're going to do right over here, that stretch before the roundabout, and as you're going through the roundabout, it'll be posted at 35 with an advisory speed as you go through the roundabout. That's probably 20 miles an hour. So the speeds would come down and right in that stretch, whether they zoom back up or not. That's always a debatable thing. But I think with the two roundabouts, certainly in that stretch, you probably have pretty good compliance with the posted speeds.
My first thought on roundabouts has always been about traffic flow and not as a speed control. So the first question I had about the roundabout is, if I remember correctly from the traffic studies, there's actually more traffic near Christensen and McCaslin than there is Indiana McCaslin, I believe.
Yes, the traffic volume is about 9,000 vehicles a day from 128 to Colton, and as you get north of Colton, it's about 12,000.
Right. When you're turning right off of Christensen onto McCaslin, you have a little slip lane there where you can actually stage and go right in. But if you're turning left, it can be at certain times of the day very tough to get in on McCaslin. So my first thought was, well, why wouldn't we put a traffic circle there to allow people easier access to get onto McCaslin? If it's for speed purposes, boy, I don't know, why wouldn't we just have one of the deputies park up by there more often like we did on Colton Road when we knew that there was a lot of speeding traffic there, to start writing some tickets? I think that would actually change people's habits fairly quickly. I would rather do that than change the speed down to 35 miles an hour. To me, it's 35 miles. Would we change the speed down here to 35 as well? Or not down here, but at the top of McCaslin? Or would we leave that the same, or leave that at 45?
Yeah, I think that the concept was to change it to 35 all the way through McCaslin, knowing that we need to have input from our public works folks to tell us what's going to be most effective. You raise a great point, Chris, and I think ideally 24/7 enforcement would probably be the best thing, but we live in a world of finite resources, I guess. The concept really from the Planning Commission standpoint was trying to re-educate to the point where folks realize, hey, we really are entering into a residential area. Mm-hmm. However best to accomplish that, we're wide open.
Yeah. It just seems strange to have McCaslin to go down to 35 miles an hour, the same as what we would have on Colton. What is McCaslin considered? It's a major arterial.
Yes.
So if you take it down to 35, would it still be considered a major arterial?
Well, the status of an arterial is more having to do with the volume and the function of the road. I mean, here McCaslin's 2.5 miles long, and it's continuous all the way through Louisville. So there's a lot of longer trips on this roadway. The other thing about McCaslin, especially in this area, it's more of a rural facility.
A what?
A rural
okay.
facility is an urban, so you don't have the curb and gutter. You have kind of a wider open. You don't have houses on each side. It's kind of in the farmland, which tends to be wide open and tends to promote, higher speeds.
Yeah, because we talked about, when we went through the comprehensive plan again, we talked about putting more trees along the sides of the road and to make it a little more confined or restricted so that it would discourage speeding traffic. And I would prefer to do that than to lower the speed limit. I mean, if we lower, we know that 10 years out that the traffic is only going to increase, correct? 20 years out it's going to increase. And I guess we could change the speed limits then. But as the traffic increases, and if we slow the traffic down, are we going to create more traffic problems by doing that? Slower traffic, more traffic going through the town. Would that create more traffic issues and getting out on Christensen and some of the other roads?
Right. A couple of things. Just lowering the speed limit doesn't really affect the speeds. People are going to drive according to the conditions, and that's why we recommended in the comp plan, let's do something to change the design of the roadway. Put medians or something that makes it feel like a lower speed road. Right now it has the feel of a higher speed road.
Okay.
So just posting a speed is probably not going to be very effective in actually lowering the speeds. But if you put a roundabout, if you put medians, if you put some curves that have design speeds that are designed at 40 or 45, then people would tend to drive at the lower speed.
Okay.
The other thing, in terms of, I guess, where you're coming from, if you lower the speed, if it takes more travel time to go through the corridor, then the people that are coming from outside the corridor that don't live here, that are traveling through, maybe they have another route that would be more attractive, and maybe would take some of that traffic and discourage them from coming through here and letting them take another route. Of course, there aren't too many routes.
You might be giving us more credit than we deserve in terms of our deliberative process. I think what we were kind of landing on was recognizing that it's going to take a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years before we see this roundabout in place. But I think we kind of landed on the square of that's going to probably solve a lot of the problems. But what to do between now and then?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what brings us here tonight.
Well, let me ask one more question. So it sounds like you're not a proponent of lowering the speed limit to 35.
No, not at this time. And staff is not supportive of that just because we don't think it'll have an effect on speeds.
So in your opinion then, if we don't lower the speed and we don't have the resources to put a traffic circle in at Indiana and McCaslin, what would you suggest would actually work really well to keep the speeds at 45 miles an hour or less?
Well, I think we've included in our budget request for next year additional speed radar signs as one of your recommendation. And I think certainly the one coming down from 28th to Indiana, that's one that would get your attention. At least try to drop your speed to the posted speed. Instead of doing 65, maybe you get down to 50 or 55. So I think that would be something we would support, an additional speed radar signs on McCaslin.
What I would recommend, I like that idea of the speed radar sign, but not like the one that we have at the opposite end. But those ones that when you get to a certain speed, they flash red and blue lights.
Yes.
I mean, to me, that's very disturbing when you see that. Yes. So if we could do something like that, I think that would actually have a big impact on people. And if you put it right before they get to the corner there and it's flashing at 50 miles an hour, I think that would actually be a better choice than lowering the speed limit at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of putting in one of those radar signs. I think that that's, regardless of what the speed limit is, I think that that sounds like it's low-hanging fruit. It's, you know, relatively inexpensive, and if that can at least address some of the problems immediately, that makes sense. I'd like to hear from Sergeant Chamberlain as to, you know, what you're seeing out there, whether you think that the road is at the proper speed limit, if you think that it should be dropped. And if it's a question of enforcement, I mean, I guess from my perspective, you know, $1.5 million for a roundabout is a lot of money, and we could fund additional enforcement for over a decade with that kind of money. So, you know, I don't think that we need to be rushing into looking at ways where we can spend, you know, taxpayer dollars if we don't necessarily need to. But I'd like to hear from Sergeant Chamberlain.
So I agree with Alex. As far as lowering the speed limit, a speed limit sign doesn't slow down traffic. You know, when you're coming down that hill, people aren't necessarily paying attention to the speed limit sign. We have seen some pretty good speeds on that road, and officers probably spend as much time out on McCaslin as they do as on Colton or any other road. But the problem is the officers, when they're out working, they want to do stuff. So they'll spend an hour out there on McCaslin and write a ticket. They'll go to Colton, spend an hour and write 10 tickets. So they want to feel like they're doing something. They're going to spend more time on Colton, where they feel like they're having more of an effect than on McCaslin, where they're stopping in the car.
So we're writing more tickets to our residents than we are people cutting through Superior.
We're having more people speeding on Colton than we are on McCaslin.
Okay. Okay.
And what do you think about the actual posted limit on McCaslin right now? Does
Like I
it
said, I
feel
agree with Alex. I think 45 is fine. If you lower it to 35, a sign's not going to slow cars down. We're going to write tickets for higher amounts. If that's what you want, is the revenue from the tickets, then by all means lower it.
Okay. And what about, Alex, what are we thinking about in terms of safety? You know, are we seeing an unusual amount of accidents on McCaslin or anything like that?
You know, we have a few accidents at the intersections. I don't think we have a whole lot on the segments.
No, the last actual one that I saw that wasn't in an intersection has been quite a while. We have them at 128 in McCaslin, and then at the other stoplights, but nothing significant within the straightaways. One Corvette that tried to make a roundabout without going around it, but that was speed.
Okay.
I'm interested in the striping changes. You know, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and not to pass the buck, I think this might have been something that Alex had raised that we should consider. And the idea was that, first off, there's a lot of bicycle traffic on McCaslin. I think we all can agree to that. And that's the Morgul-Bismarck route right there. And you do see, particularly on weekend, I mean, McCaslin gets a lot of traffic during the weekdays, there's no question. On the weekends, there's a lot of bicycle traffic. And you know, it seems as though there's some potential for, you know, car-cyclist collisions. I don't think we've had any so far, thank goodness. One of the things that we talked about in meeting with our staff is, you know, what can be done to sort of make more of a demarcation of the cycling lane. And as I understand it, there are standards in terms of how wide the stripe should be to demonstrate that this is a shoulder that's reserved for cycling. As I recall, I think we determined we could widen the stripe by a couple more inches from where it is. That would necessarily narrow the roadway a bit. And I think so it kind of has a dual purpose. It sort of alerts drivers to the fact that you got a good cycling lane, you're going to have cyclists along there. I mean, it should be obvious, but I don't think it is obvious to many motorists. But to Alex's point earlier, it's trying to create conditions where where motorists are mindful that, you know, I'm going into an area now where this isn't a freeway. You know, I need to be alert.
Okay. So did the Planning Commission discuss that? And there's plenty of room on McCaslin to, I guess, narrow the traffic lanes, to increase the bicycle lanes and still have it safe at a 45-mile-an-hour speed or a 50-mile-an-hour speed?
I think we will end up widening the stripe. It's 4 inches now. We may go to a 6-inch stripe, and we'll take that out of the travel lane. So I'm not sure we're widening the bike lane at all.
Right.
We may be narrowing the travel lane by a couple inches.
And that'll make a difference?
Well, I don't know if it'll make a whole lot of difference, but we'll give it a try.
It seems like you would actually want to just keep it at 4 inches and move it over 2 inches. I think 2 inches, well, maybe that's not that much, but when you're on a bicycle, maybe every couple inches matters a lot. But I don't know. Is there not room on McCaslin on either side to extend the roadway by a foot or 2 feet or 3 feet?
As far as the actual pavement, or
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So why wouldn't we consider that and just don't increase the width of the road and the striping, leave the striping the way it is, but just make it wider
Well,
on each side?
it would have to be with an overlay of when we overlay or improve McCaslin at some point. That's something we could look at.
Yeah, I think that's something that we should look at, and maybe that's something we can discuss next week. I know it's late to start the discussion, but if this is as big of an issue as we think it is, we should have done this 10 years ago when we went back to the Marble Bismarck. So maybe that's something we start discussing.
Yeah, I mean,
I honestly don't think that widening the stripe to 6 inches is going to make any difference, or even moving it over a couple inches. I'm not sure how much of a difference that would make, but certainly widening the road in favor of the bicycle lanes by a foot or 2 feet is going to make a huge difference.
Certainly.
I don't disagree with that in theory, but obviously that's a very expensive task to go, and if we're going to be repaving it, it's one thing if we're planning for a repavement sometime in the future, certainly. But if we're restriping anyway, I think right now, what we've spoken about as a board is it kind of makes sense to give the bicyclists a little extra space if we have it. And I like the idea in the memo here about putting up share the road signs. Trying to get at least a little outreach where we could get the most bang for the buck without spending a lot of money, making it a little more bike friendly, because there certainly is a lot of bike traffic on the weekends, and wouldn't want anybody getting hit by a car. So so I think generally speaking, I'm in favor of the radar signs. I think that makes sense. I think putting up share the road signs, if we can give a couple additional inches to the bicyclists when we're already restriping, that makes sense. The bigger questions about expanding the actual width of the road or putting in a roundabout, those are really big decisions that I wouldn't want to rush into.
What's the schedule for McCaslin? When do you plan to redo any of the surface, whether it's repave entirely or just do the cover?
Excuse me. We're in our budget request for next year. We're looking at reconstructing it from the roundabout up to Rock Creek Parkway. I think later on down the road, 2021 is when we get back to McCaslin and do some upgrades with overlays and so forth. But we're just costing them out now as an overlay of McCaslin. But we certainly could look at the difference and see if we want a couple of extra feet and provide that cost estimate for you.
Yeah, because you probably estimate that. That would be actually new road, though. So if you went 3 feet on each side, you have a formula that you use, correct?
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to know what that cost would be.
Sure. We can provide that during the budget presentations.
So next steps, then, we can just say, let's go ahead and do a radar sign, and
It's in your budget request.
right. So I mean, we can give that approval now, right? Or do we have to go through the board to do that?
Well, it'll be for next year. It's
Oh,
not
we
budget,
can't-
budget
we can't
request
do it.
for next year. Yeah.
Okay.
You can pay for it, Chris.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to ask if there's any public comment on this topic?
Sure.
Does anybody want to comment on the McCaslin issues? Yes, sir.
My name's Bob McLaren. I'm at 212 West Douglas here in Old Town Superior. The only question I have, and it was kind of coming down from 128 on McCaslin, I noticed there's a sign that says no engine braking. And is that really geared towards diesel Jake brakes? Is that what that's geared towards?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because, in a pickup truck doing, starting out doing 35, heading down that strip and the incline, I constantly use my engine to slow down. But I don't know if
It's intentional for semis, and the reason those signs were initially put up is when they were doing all the work on 36 and the trucks were all coming down McCaslin. They were constantly using their Jake brakes, and we were getting numerous noise complaints
Sure.
about the Jake brakes. So that's when the town put those signs up.
Well, could you encourage braking with, not using diesel but gasoline engines? Could you encourage that to slow people down? I'm only asking. It seems like I look at that and go, well, I'm not supposed to use my engine to slow down.
Right.
You're constantly riding your brakes. That's the only comment I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bob McCool, 312 West Coal Creek Drive, and a member of the Planning Commission. There's a little bit more to this when we were talking about this. We have, with all this increase in traffic, tremendous, I come down that road. It's so easy to get your speed up. And you've got a whole residential section here there are homes that are backed up to McCaslin. Those 60, 65 mile an hour speeds, they make more noise. As trucks come down, they make more noise. The thought was, coming into Superior, can we do things to just make it clear that you're coming into a residential area, like Jim was saying? So the narrowing discussion was a pretty big discussion of narrowing the road. And I don't know what the rules are for how narrow the road can be based on speed limits, but it's really clear to me in Boulder that there are places it's just uncomfortable to drive the speed. And so creating a situation where it's uncomfortable to drive at that speed, in theory, should reduce the traffic. And so, I love the idea of widening the bike lanes. I think it's great. This is the Morgul Bismarck. It's, if we want to be a bike-friendly community, let's take advantage of that. But if we can get those roads down narrower by a foot or two, I don't know what the right width is to encourage people to do 45 or less. But use striping. You mentioned using trees, using medians to help people recognize that they're coming into a residential area and make it uncomfortable to do 50 or 55 miles an hour. And we could probably try that with striping. That was where the discussion was going. Can we truly create in Boulder they did those green buffer lanes. It's a little insane in some of the areas, but they created green buffer areas between the road, then there's a buffer area, then there's the bike lane, in order to really separate traffic. So that's where, at least when I was talking about this at the Planning Commission, that's what was going through my head. Can we just create a situation where the roads are are narrower to discourage that 50, 55 mile an hour traffic, and use striping to give the bikes a little more room, but also create a buffer, but more so to force the narrowness of the road to make it discouraging to want to go 50 or 55 miles an hour. So,
Bob, do you think that having one of the radar signs that flashes that really bright lights,
I think that'll help.
Get people's attention and
it
make
gets
them
mine
slow
when
down?
I see it. Yep.
Yeah.
And I've been in the car with people driving down. We're like, oh crap, you're doing 60. And I think yes, if a flashing light would probably catch it. That's going to catch some people as well. But
Yeah.
it just feels to me that what controls traffic is creating situations where your speed limit matches
The environment.
It's,
I get it.
it's ultimately, and I know that's not tomorrow. And yes, I think a speed sign will make a difference and probably help some, and probably some, additional enforcement as well. But anyway, those are my thoughts on speed.
Thanks, Bob.
My name's Phil Kuffner. I live at 7520 West Coal Creek Drive. You know, you talk about narrowing lanes and Jake breaks. I think safety is far more important, not to narrow traffic down when you got cars going self-admittedly 55, 60 miles an hour. You narrow the lane. It's really dangerous. Somebody can get killed doing that. It's uncomfortable for residents. Maybe widen the road, a different buffer between their homes. Make it better for people to get through there, not make it a dangerous situation. Yeah. I understand the Jake brakes, but 80,000 pounds in a truck going down a hill at 65 miles an hour, I'd rather hear the noise than see an accident that takes someone's life. I understand the signs, but with vehicles at that rate of speed, we're talking about lives. So why would you want to narrow them? Get more officers up there. If you got to hire 10 of them, that's the biggest deterrent there is. Whenever you go by a street and every time you go by there, just like they used to do up here on the west end of Coal Creek, there was a sheriff sitting at that stop sign constantly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. But I think we'll be leaning on staff a little bit to really give us those answers. That makes sense to me, that if you narrow the lanes and you keep the speed at 45 and people have a tendency to go 50 or 55, that you could cause some unintended consequences by narrowing it. But I think that's something that we need to get some feedback from staff on, and that's why I ask, if you narrow the lanes and that is a major arterial street, then could there be potential consequences with that? I do like the idea, the low-hanging fruit of having the radar sign. I really think that that's one of the big things that we could do that will stop people from speeding by making it really obnoxious. When it gets to 50 miles, when someone gets to 50 miles an hour, it just flashes really bright because that gets people's attention. So I think that I would prefer that we go that route first before doing anything else. And maybe we can come up with a budget in the next couple of years to actually widen it for bicycle safety and so forth.
Well, people really hate the idea of cameras taking pictures of cars, radar speed, and those types of things.
Yeah, we did that a few years back, and that wasn't very, very good.
No, people hate when you get in their wallets, but they will slow down if they know there's a camera there. And it don't matter if you're cut through people or whoever you are. If there's a camera taking a picture of you, doing that. That, and I wanted to respond to the legal limit on roads. There's trucks that, the society we live in, there's all kinds of things that come down roads. There's got to be a legal limit on the width of the road to be safe for some of these big trucks hauling big equipment, military things. So consider the legal width of the lane. I don't know what that is, if there's a state requirement or how that works, but I know there is one.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chad Chavez, 407 South 2nd. Sorry, 401 South 2nd. I guess I didn't understand what Chamberlain was saying about the road. And if you could re-explain that. How many tickets and accidents have we had on McCaslin?
We do write a fair amount of tickets on McCaslin.
What's fair amount mean?
I couldn't give you an exact number.
Okay,
off the top of my head, I can get the stats for you.
Were you saying you were giving more tickets
we're
on
writing
Colton?
We're writing more tickets on Colton than we were on McCaslin.
How
Officers
about
are making
accidents?
accidents. Most of our accidents on McCaslin are here or up at 128.
Yeah, I think the example given was that there was one ticket in the area between 128th and Indiana in an hour, but in that same time frame, there's 10 given on Colton. Yeah,
Correct.
And
So do we really need to spend money on a road that's not causing an issue right now? I think there's bigger issues going on.
I agree with you that there are a lot of other things that are important to some in town that we could be spending money on, but I do agree, though, that there are some potential issues, and maybe not so. I'm not so as concerned with the speeders that are going 60, 65 miles an hour. I think those are fewer. My big concerns are the residents trying to get to work, getting out on McCaslin from Indiana, getting out on McCaslin from
Well, 35 or
Christensen.
45, if they're already doing 50 and 60, they're still going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more getting revenue ticket than anything if they're up there patrolling. We don't have enough patrol cars as it is now.
I really think that I'd like to believe that by putting in that radar sign, like we've talked about, is going to solve a lot of the issues.
It does work for me coming down this too, but
Yeah.
to widen the road out to look at a roundabout, stuff like, I just think there's bigger fish we got to fry right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, good.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, amazing grandpa. Is there any other public comment on? Yep.
Robert Momarts, a resident of Saddlebrook. Part of what we discussed in the Planning Commission was to sort of visualize a trip down McCaslin from 126. So one thing we had envisioned was a monument sign which basically says something along the lines of entering Town of Superior, share the road, and get the drivers used to the idea of slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
The roundabout at Indiana is largely a safety thing because if you try to make a left turn out off of Indiana to go up 126, it's a crapshoot,
Right.
Basically. And so if you put a roundabout there, not only does that make that safer, but it also gets the drivers that are coming into town used to the idea that this is going to be a lot of roundabouts that they have to contend with, and they might as well get used to the idea because you've got one already on Colton. I understand one is being considered for the top of McCaslin up by the Key Bank. Then you have a couple of others that service town center. So you're just telling them ahead of time that this is going to be the experience, and you have to get used to it. The widening of the strip, in my opinion, the wider the strip and the bolder the strip, the easier it is to spot it. And if you're entertaining higher speeds, then I think a wider strip makes it safer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bob, the monument sign, I'm interested in that. What size? Because we do have a sign at the top of McCaslin, I believe, that says now entering the Town of Superior, but it's just a little sign.
Right.
But when you say monument size, are you talking like a monument sign like the sign that's out here that lights up, or something smaller? Is it made out of brick?
I don't think we got
or?
into the dimensions per se. That was probably going to be a staff decision, but the idea was more along the lines of if when you come down off of 126, here's a town. And the town encourages sharing the road, and here's roundabouts, and here's a speed sign, and it's like pay attention because just when they were doing the construction here at the bottom of the hill from the Key Bank, they had a police car right about where the roundabout was. They had a flashing 25-mile-an-hour limit, and people are still going down 40, 45 miles an hour, knowing that there's a police car there. So you've got to do something to reinforce that. As to rushing into a roundabout, this has been discussed for 4 years in the updates. I don't think it's really rushing. I think we have to deal with the fact that there's going to be a lot of traffic. I don't know what's going to happen traffic-wise when some of those big developments on 93 get done, Candelas and some of those places, how much more traffic is going to come through here. But I know that it loads up about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
George Kuffner, 7520 West Coal Creek. We're up here talking about spending all this money in roundabouts and slowing people down. This was built in 68, 69 to go to Rocky Flats, kind of as a cut through. And it seems like if you slow people down to 35 mile an hour, all we're going to do is stretch the traffic jam closer to 36 and further coming off 128. Well, why don't we make it a 4-lane, enforce it with the cops, and he's right. The cop can sit on the side of the road. People won't slow down in their hurry. They go right by him. He pulls them over and gives them a ticket right here at the bridge. It's funny. But why don't we make it convenient for people to leave our system to get, so that we're not backed up all the way to 36? Because it'll get that way. We keep pinching them down. There's no other real shortcuts around here. You go up to 93, and it's bumper to bumper parking lot in the mornings and also in the evenings. It's bad. When you go down towards Wadsworth, it's just as bad. So there's not a lot of options here. But if we put a 4-lane in there, let it go. We're 4 lanes down here. Let it go through. Let it flow. Then it can flow at 45, and we'll do more cars with less congestion. And then less congestion is safer for us all, in my opinion.
Do you think so put yourself in the residents that live right along McCaslin, and would you be up here saying the same thing, to increase the lanes to 4? Because essentially you'd be encouraging more people to come through Superior. Now there's a good thing for that. I mean, we got a town center here that we'd like as many people to come to that as possible.
Well,
But do we want a lot of traffic going behind the homes there on McCaslin?
there's homes up there. We're kind of at an advantage point there. The homes are above the road noise, so they're not going to be affected like if they were at the same elevation. They're up above the noise level. Yeah, I mean, we got the town center, we got Costco's. The more we can generate at them places, the less we have to pay in our property taxes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I've been here a long time. Believe me, it's aggravating. If you tell me I have to go down to Caterpillar and get on 270, you might as well pull your teeth. Because I don't care what time of the day it is, it's traffic.
Yeah.
Parking lot, boom, boom, all the way down, all the way back.
Yeah.
But so it seems like to me as if you could relieve that, let them get where they're going. And then we have a lot of cars for a real short period of time. And then it's handleable for the rest of us that live here. Because it is aggravating when you live here and three sets at the light to get out. You know, I mean, you pretty soon,
Sure.
geez.
Yeah.
And we're building more. Oh, what we really need to build is more roads, and we could start with 4 lanes there. And, you know, I mean, we haven't done much for our highway system in 40, 50 years. I mean, look how long it took them to widen 36, and now by the time they got it widened, it's still not wide enough. So, you know what I mean? I think the best deterrent is Jim's cop cars. They don't have to have lights on them. I mean, with lights, without lights, little guy sits down here and he can write tickets till his pen runs out of ink. They come out of that roundabout and he's got them.
Yeah.
So, and besides that, that fills our coffers.
Yeah.
So if we open it up, let them go. Just monitor them big time on the speeding, and just hit them hard. Because most of the people doing that don't live here. And very few of the people that don't live here are going to come and bitch at a town board meeting that I live in town and he wrote me a ticket. Oh yeah, I was speeding, but he shouldn't have wrote me a ticket because I live here. So, you know, let's try to accommodate them.
Yeah,
Right
it's
out of
not
their
an
money.
easy solution, so yeah.
Right out of their money.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. What's that? Yeah.
By the way, I had handouts of, anybody hasn't gotten the memo. All right. So thank you all for returning the questionnaires. The TSC wanted to have a discussion of Coal Creek Drive. I think we've discussed this several times in the past, but we wanted to go out and get a survey of opinions about various things. So we gave you some options. Before I get into that, let me provide you some. Just refresh some data. We've presented this in the past about the actual traffic volumes and speeds on Coal Creek. We've been taking counts over the last several years. These rows show the various segments on Coal Creek, and then across are the traffic volumes at various portions of Coal Creek. Latest ones were done in January of 17. When you go from McCaslin, the first, during the weekday, that first column here is on a Friday, about 2,100. From McCaslin, the first to second drops down to about 1,200. From third to fourth, about 1,000. And that's vehicles per day, total of both directions. Getting down to between 6th and 8th, about 665. So those are the
traffic, and then we had also counted weekends, and we saw that Saturdays a little bit less than weekdays, and then Sundays a little less than Saturdays. In terms of speed, we have some speed data from 3rd to 4th, and we measured the 85th percentile speed, and that's a measure that traffic engineers often use to set speed limits. So if you know you have a problem when the 85th percentile speed is way more than the posted speed. In this case, we have posted speed of 25, and we've measured it several times, and at least in that particular segment, it's a little less than the posted speed. However, as you get up towards 6th and 8th Avenue, the posted speed is 29 miles an hour versus 25 posted. Also, the vehicles exceeding the speed limit are almost half in that particular stretch. Then what type of traffic in terms of breakdown by bikes and cars versus larger trucks? The bigger trucks are about 2 to 3% of the traffic, and that was taken on between 4th and 8th. We actually did a classification count. The other thing I wanted to show you, if you can read this, we had some cameras up on Coal Creek last year, and we tried to watch vehicles and where they turned and try to determine how many vehicles are actually cutting through, traveling the whole length from McCaslin to 76th Street. And this is a kind of a small sample. We looked at an hour in the morning, an hour at noon, and an hour in the evening, and then we kind of classified the hours, kind of show where the traffic was getting on and off of Coal Creek. So in this case, for the westbound traffic, about 7% of the traffic that we followed on the cameras went all the way through the Coal Creek from McCaslin to 76th Street. About 29% went from McCaslin to 4th. So that's a total. So when we talk about cut-through traffic, I would say that's cut-through traffic is about 35% of the traffic on any one given segment. So that's where we give you that kind of data. This is a survey, and what we had sent out are descriptions of the various options. And what I'll do is provide kind of a summary of the results of the survey. We sent over 400 questionnaires out to Richland Superior, Coal Creek Crossing, and Sagamore. We had 76 turned in. Actually, another one came in at 5 o'clock this evening. It's not included in this table. So I'll just go through the options and then kind of summarize what the questionnaire showed. So the first option we presented was install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at 6th Avenue. You've probably seen these around town. We have about 4 on Rock Creek Parkway. We actually just installed the 5th down by Safeway, and that's open and operating. The cost of those are about $4,000 or $5,000, depending on whether you need it. If you just install them, if you need a modification of the curb and gutter or so forth, it'd be a little higher. So in that particular one, 7 of the 76 respondents ranked that as the number 1 priority, and then 18 mentioned that on one of the form, on one of their priorities. The weighted score, what I did here was take, we only asked to rank 3 options. So the number 1 option, we gave a score of 3. Number 2 option, we gave a score of 2. And number 3, we gave a score of 1. So if you do 3 times 7, 2 times 7, and 1 times 4, that gives you a weighted score of 39 for that particular option as compared to some of these other ones. So that's how we could have done it several other ways. Installing speed humps was the second option. The cost for a speed hump is in the $10,000 to $15,000 range. To be effective, minimum of 2 or 3 speed humps may be needed to discourage cut-through traffic, and this measure may divert 20 to 50% of cut-through traffic. Now, cut-through traffic, again, is like that 35%. It's not all traffic, but the 35%. So you may get some diversion, especially here where we have a parallel route on Sycamore. So for that, option 16 ranked that as number 1. 31 had that mentioned somewhere in that questionnaire, so the weighted score there was 74. Also, we had about 4 questionnaires asked or stated they thought raised crosswalks at either 6th or 8th would be a good thing to do, so that's similar to what a speed hump would do. We also had a couple that were very much opposed to speed humps. One that had a handicapped accessible van and felt that would be cause damage to their vehicle. Next option, option number 3, is installing speed radar signs. 5 had that ranked as number 1. 16 had that ranked somewhere on their questionnaire, weighted score of 33. It's typically about $7,000 per installation for a speed radar sign. 4th option was to install a median on Coal Creek Drive, east or west of 6th Avenue. What that would do, we have bulb outs at the 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue intersections. So traffic kind of comes to the middle. If you put a median east or west of those intersections, then you can create a chicane effect where they have to go to the center of the roadway at the intersection, then they have to go to the outside of the roadway, go around the median. That median would have to take out parking. You'd have to restrict parking in the area of the median, so you maybe lose 3 or 4 spaces on each side. Cost would be about $30,000 to do something like that. Again, we're trying to redirect the traffic and give the feel that this is slower by redirecting the flow of the paths for the vehicles to take. Number 5 was to install no truck signs, and we had a suggestion of no trucks over 7,000 pounds. Boulder uses this on some of their residential streets. We'd install these signs at either end of Coal Creek, one near as you enter on from McCaslin, and one on the 76th Street side. They're fairly low cost, about $100 per sign. That was probably the highest ranked, top ranking for 18 of the respondents, mentioned on 37 questionnaires. So that had probably the top weighted score of any of the options. Number 6 would be restrict left turns at 4th and Sycamore. Let's see. Just to zoom in on this. Here's 4th, turning onto Sycamore, and the idea would be putting a little island like we have similar to what is at Coal Creek and McCaslin. Put a little island here to restrict or discourage the left turns. So we want to keep people from turning left and try to discourage the cut-through traffic on 4th that's trying to reach the marketplace. So 4 respondents rated that the top priority, and we have 12 that mentioned that in their top 3. 7th option was to close Coal Creek just to the west of 1st. This would, you'd have put either Jersey barriers or some way of making that closure. There would be a potential increase of volumes on 1st or 2nd as people try to go around that. That cost could be as much as $30,000 depending on how you would do that. Some residents suggested maybe just putting concrete barriers, doing something temporary before you make that a permanent closure. Only one person ranked that as the top priority, and 4 mentioned that as in their top 3. Similar to that was to make the closure between just west of 3rd. Again, one person ranked that as top priority, and 6 mentioned that as one of their top 3. Finally, we gave it the do-nothing option, and that was the top priority of 15 respondents and mentioned on 24 of the questionnaires. So that's what we presented. We had a bunch of suggestions that came back from the residents. There are a lot of good suggestions here that we may need to take a look at and see what we could do. A couple of first ones were cameras at key intersections for running red lights or stop signs. Lower the speed limit. I'm not sure to what. Just lower the speed limit. A right turn only on 4th. That's similar to option 6, where we restricted left turns. But that may be put a median across on Sycamore across 4th, so you can't turn left, and you can't turn left in. I think that's what that meant. Add a monument sign. Add signs, no marketplace access, neighborhood traffic only. Restrict hours that vehicles can turn left from McCaslin to Coal Creek Drive. Extend 5th Avenue through Founders Park. Left turn only out of Coal Creek Crossing from 6th. One-way traffic all the way around Founders Park. Install no through traffic signs. No right turns from Coal Creek onto McCaslin. Right now you can make lefts in the northbound direction, so that would eliminate the left turns you can make from McCaslin into Coal Creek Drive. Make all intersections on Coal Creek all-way stops. Close Coal Creek on the other end at 76th Street. Make Coal Creek one-way westbound from McCaslin. Additional traffic stops for Virginia. Raise pedestrian crossing at 6th or possibly 8th. Close Coal Creek west of 4th. 19th is interesting. Have town contracts contain a clause that trucks not use Coal Creek Drive. And we have been working with our contractor, does a lot of our work to try to keep him off of Coal Creek, keep his trucks off when they're doing town work. And of course, he thinks it's going to take more time, and we've agreed that we would pay any of his additional costs to be stayed off. Restrict the northbound left from McCaslin to Coal Creek to emergency vehicles only, and close Coal Creek between 1st and McCaslin. So a bunch of suggestions there. We also had several suggestions that didn't deal with Coal Creek Drive, but issues that they wanted us to look at, and we certainly would look into some of these because they were brought up. It's nice to get that feedback from the residents in the area. With that, I'm through. That's the report on all the information we received from the public. And I want to thank everybody that returned a survey form. They were very valuable for me, and I'm sure for the board in reading those comments.
Can I, a quick question about your traffic counts. Can you go to that page, please? Is it possible, or how come you don't have, in 2014 you have traffic numbers from 1st Avenue to 2nd, but you don't have it from McCaslin to 1st? Is it possible in the future that you actually populate all those? Because I find it, for me anyway, it's just difficult to see any kind of pattern, any trend when it's kind of mixed like that. Is there any way to populate all those cells?
As far as, you mean go back?
Well, I mean, don't you have traffic? So you have traffic counts for 1st Avenue to 2nd Avenue in 2014, but you don't have any traffic count in 2014 for McCaslin to 1st. But you have it for McCaslin to 1st in 2010.
Right. I think these counts were done. We got them from a traffic consultant. I think was doing some work for Rogers Farm, so he was focused on just around where 2nd Avenue came into Coal Creek. So that's why maybe we should just take that that row of data out so it doesn't confuse things.
Well, I hate to have you take any of the data out, but is there any way that when you do your traffic studies that you actually account for everything, for every intersection that we're looking at?
That's what we've been trying to do here in our more recent counts.
Okay. Okay.
I definitely want to hear from the public, but my reading of the survey results, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Alex, but it just seems like the survey results are just all over the map, right? And no one wants a median. No one wants Coal Creek west of 1st closed, or Coal Creek west of 3rd closed. But then we've got people who want no trucks. We've got people who want speed bumps. Doing nothing is also pretty popular. And I guess what I would like to know from you, Alex, is it seems to me like this is a multi-pronged problem, right? So I don't know if it's necessarily a speed problem, but it's definitely like a volume of people trying to access the marketplace. That seems to be a problem. And then there's the increasing number of people who are living here. We've got the original town residents, and now we've got the Coal Creek Crossing development, so you've got more residences here. So the nature and character of the neighborhood has changed with that development. And maybe people are a little more sensitive to the truck traffic as well as a result of that. This is going to be one of those decisions where I don't think we're going to be making everybody happy, and I think that's going to be impossible to make everybody happy. But I certainly want to hear from the public.
Well, don't put me on the spot. I hope they will. I hope they will get together and come up.
Tonight is your night to shine.
So I guess in your professional opinion, what do you see here as the heart of the problem, Alex?
Well, there's cut-through traffic. There's truck issues. From what data we've tried to get, at least from our counts, and the trucks don't seem like a large percentage, but there are the comments from the questionnaires, the perception is that trucks is a real problem. Again, if we post no trucks over 7,000 pounds, there's an enforcement issue. I think we have a legal issue that we have to check with our town attorney that's okay. You may need an ordinance to put that in. And certainly, from what we've heard from the residents, that's a major issue. And then the issue up by 6th is crossing to the park, and I think there's some solutions up there with rectangular rapid flashing devices, or stop sign, or raised crossing. That's certainly, there's several options there that we can implement to help that particular issue. The closures are a pretty drastic step, and as you know, whenever you close a road, that traffic's going to go somewhere, and it may affect some of the other streets, and we have to be very mindful of that and careful in what we do.
I agree with Mark that this is a tough one. This is all over the board, and no matter what we do moving forward, not everybody in this room or in Original Town is going to be happy with it. But I think that actually, kind of looking at it differently, I think that, again, there's that we use that term a lot, low-hanging fruit. And I think there's some opportunity here that we can see some results fairly quick. Now, I will say up front that I'm one of those ones guilty of using Coal Creek as cut-through traffic to get to Target or Office Max. This was before. I mean, just this morning I went down to Office Max and I found myself turning on Marshall because it actually seems easier to me to go down. I mean, if you hit the light, okay, you got to sit there for a little bit, but just having the wider road, it just seemed easier to go down Marshall. So I've kind of naturally converted to taking the proper way and not using it as cut-through. But I kind of eliminated some of the things in here that I don't think are practical. I agree with Mark that closing Coal Creek at either west of 1st or 3rd is not the right thing to do because I think you're just going to send more traffic down both of those streets, and I can imagine what the residents that live on those streets would have to say about that. The speed humps, yeah, that was a high percentage, but speeding is not the issue. It doesn't appear to be, but we did learn in a previous meeting that when you put those in, that you reduce traffic 20 to 50%. Is that correct? Cut through traffic.
Yeah, we had, in that particular area by Coal Creek Crossing, we had 87%. It's cut through traffic.
Right. So I see maybe that's one of the solutions that we should really consider. I agree, installing medians. I think we've heard from original town residents that they don't want anything like that down there. The one that seems like the most logical to me, and it didn't score as high as some of the others, is restrict the left turn, because didn't you show that 35% of the traffic is cut through traffic up to 4th?
29%.
Oh, 29, I thought I heard 34. Okay, so let's just say it's 35. To me, that's a significant number. And if people are using Colton to cut through to go over to Office Max or Target or wherever, and you restrict that, that's going to prevent them from doing that. So, am I understanding that correctly? So if we can, by putting that no left turn at Sycamore on 4th, and you can reduce the traffic by up to 35%, doesn't that seem like that'd be the right thing to do? No?
How are we supposed to go to Target?
Well, okay, I get that's the discussion that let's have that. I mean, the question was, how would residents in original town get to Target, and is there not another way? Can we go up to, what is it, 76th and go that way? And I know that maybe that's an inconvenience, but is it worth reducing the amount of traffic that cuts through to do that? Because I don't think some of the other things are realistic. And the trucks, now the other with the trucks, how big is a 7,000-pound truck? Is that what that was, 7,000 pounds or greater? How big is a 7,000-pound truck?
It'd be a pickup truck. My pickup truck weighs more than 7,000 pounds.
Yeah, so.
Thank you. It wouldn't affect the pickup. So I guess I had 7,000 pounds being anything lower than a pickup would be okay. Anything, higher, FedEx truck maybe okay. We'd have to look at the type of trucks that we would be restricting. But you wouldn't want a semi, a tractor trailer going through. That certainly would not be something that would come through.
Yeah, and I know there was a problem, especially when we were building Coal Creek Crossing with the construction traffic coming up and down. But
dump trucks, tractor trailers, those are the types of trucks that we're trying to restrict.
Yeah, okay. So I know Mr. Kupfner has a truck that he drives, a big truck, and he lives on, what street is that he lives at, 4th? Is that 4th?
Coal Creek. He lives further west on Coal Creek.
No.
Okay, no, on 4th?
Senior.
Yes, yeah. That would be one that would be restricted, yes.
So if we restricted him from going down Coal Creek from McCaslin, then he'd have to go
4th.
Marshall
Yes.
up to 76th and then back down.
Yes.
So hold on. I think for a lot of residents that makes a lot of sense, but for others it doesn't. And I think that this is the tough decision that the board and with the residents' help is going to have to make. Are we willing to inconvenience some residents for the convenience of others? And I'm not trying to say that to make anybody upset, but I mean that's the reality here. And that's what's going to happen. We're hearing the feedback from residents that we've got to stop doing things and we've got to limit traffic and we've got to cut this street off. But the fact is that we're going to harm somebody. So I hope that we can get through this peacefully.
Well, to that end, I think that this is the type of problem. It is a problem. And it's our job to try to come up with solutions, and that's why I certainly appreciate everybody coming here tonight to speak during public comment and return the surveys and help us come to a decision. I think that this is the type of situation that really lends itself well to a non-permanent pilot program where we try something out. It would be inexpensive. It would be temporary. If it ends up not working out, then we can change and we can go back to the status quo beforehand, or we could try something else out. But I think that that's really how, in my mind, I see us coming to a solution. But before we get to that point, I just want to hear from everybody that wants to speak tonight, because we may be, a better solution may be coming from the public than we're coming up with tonight.
More of the problem is, other than cut through, is that the whole problem?
Safety of our children, first of all.
Well, there's a volume of traffic. There's certainly a problem that we've heard from a number of people regarding cut-through traffic. We've heard about people using, like Trustee Hansen said, using Coal Creek and then cutting through to the marketplace rather than using Marshall Road to get to the marketplace. We've heard that there's a problem with truck traffic. I'd be curious to hear from staff if that has decreased at all since the Remington development was completed. I imagine it must, because there's fewer trucks going. So then we've got additional residences as a result of that, people accessing the park, things like that. So those are the problems that I'm hearing. From the data, it doesn't look like this is a road that people are really speeding on. 5 miles an hour over the 25, but it's just not long enough, and it's not, the topography doesn't seem like it's really the Autobahn here.
That's correct. There are some speeds that are above 25, but it's not within a margin where we're going to be stopping people for. It's not an egregious offense. It's minimal speeds over 25, not major violations.
So it's really just a volume of traffic and a truck issue is basically what I'm hearing. So, but I'd love to hear from the public.
I'm Terry Batliner. I live at 312 West Maple. And I just want to kind of support the idea of no left turn at 4th and Sycamore. And one reason that I don't think people are aware of is how many people make U-turns at 4th and Sycamore. And I think it's really a safety issue. If you sat in my house and watched the number of U-turns that happen in a day, it's really dangerous. And one of my son's friends just died making an illegal U-turn. And I think that's one benefit that you would have by putting in the solutions that were talked about earlier, the little concrete thing that encouraged the right turn and no left turn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth. I live at 309 West Coal Creek Drive. And I think all of them would be a great idea, but let's be realistic. I have, in the 4 houses on our block from 3 to 4th, we have about 6 children under the age of 15. And my mom lives across the street from me. While I live at 308, she lives at 309. And so my kids are constantly crossing the street. And it is the volume of cars coming from Rock Creek cutting through, obviously, to get to Costco, Target, we all do it. I definitely think restricting that left turn would definitely help, and definitely speed bumps as well. But of course, we have to take into account the ambulance or the emergency response people being able to get over those as well. I just think that really my biggest concern is my children's getting hit by a car of people coming to go to Target, and they're trying to get those awesome deals, and they're going 45 miles an hour. And I come out yelling. And I hate doing that because I constantly have to do it all the time. So please really consider one of those two. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marina Rudolph. I live at the corner of 6th and Coal Creek. And I'm here to tell you speeding's a problem. And what's really interesting, so I'm right at the base of the hill. So the hill starts. It's honestly not the traffic coming down, and that's where you put your speed limit sign. And that I see the blue and white going off probably every other car. It's going too fast to even register on the little sign. It's the people going up. I don't know what it is. I think that road is so wide, and everybody drives in the middle of the road, and they get so much speed from 4th Street. It's almost like they feel like they have to just really put the pedal to the metal to get to the top. I don't know, but I sit in my office because I work from home. I get to see this all day long. Today there was one, when I was preparing to come over here, who went up like a rocket. I promise you, he had to be going 50 miles an hour. Some of you say that's impossible. It's possible. These people go fast. The gentleman on a yellow motorcycle who must live up in Sagamore, who thinks it's his personal speedway. Up and down, up and down. There's another gentleman on another motorcycle who likes to take kids for rides. Up and down as fast as they can. And there's nowhere for the police to hide. So when we do see a police officer, people are on their best behavior. But speeding is a huge issue. I see it every single day. The trucks, as Alex knows, when I send him notes, sometimes they pass my house 23 times in one day. And it's noisy. My house is right there. I can hear them. And most of all, it is a safety issue. We have tons of kids who cross 6th Avenue or 6th to go to the park. There's a playground right there. And yeah, there's speeding. I just really think we have a huge issue. So please do not put aside the speed. Take it from me. I see it day in and day out. It's an issue. And I'd love to see more recorders, more data. I would have loved to have seen the data from the last time you put one out. I'm surprised it's not there. And then I'm curious why the left-hand turn to Coal Creek from McCaslin isn't an option. What would happen if that came off? If we could no longer take a left?
From McCaslin onto Coal Creek?
That would cut off all of Rock Creek.
We also have a town hall.
I know.
Excuse me.
I figured that's why.
We have a town hall, and we have a lot of meetings here, so people from the rest of town would have to circle back and eventually go down 4th and come circle back. So that would be adding traffic to 4th and Coal Creek.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the reasons.
It would definitely restrict traffic, but again, there's so many unintended consequences that I think we've received by doing that.
Right. Well, but thank you. Thank you for addressing the issue. I'm incredibly appreciative for all of the work. Thanks.
Gladys Forshy, 404 South 3rd Avenue. In 1896, this town was created, and streets were platted, and they were put in as a service to the residents. That is still today, service, quote unquote, service. And you guys need to understand that. Even though this is the 21st century, there's going to be a lot of traffic. That's just the way this town is. It's grown. It's not the sleepy little burg that we were for however many years ago. Our streets are controlled by state statutes. I'm sure that you don't know those state statutes. But in 1953, the state created the ordinance to city streets and maintenance and that sort of thing. Now, if you want, I'll be glad to give you the statute numbers. I have them. In 1971, anyway, there's maps that show the plotted streets. 1911, 1903 road maps are the ones that show the plotted streets. We used those plotted streets in 1971 when we put the house numbering system in for Original Town. In 1972, Superior Volunteer Fire Department was created. We had to open streets in this town that had not been used. They were plotted, but they hadn't been used for years. The fire department had to open those streets so that we had access to them. If there was grass fire or whatever, we had to open them. That was a state law that we had to follow and go through. There again, service, quote unquote, service. I can't repeat that word enough when it comes to open streets. In 1990, the American Disability Act was created by the federal government, and the state of Colorado adopted that. So that means that applies to our streets in the town of Superior, Boulder County, Colorado. In 2009 and 2010, some realtor, and I will spare you my opinion of realtors because they are not very high marks in Original Town when it comes to realtors.
I thought you were going to spare us your opinion on them.
No, I'm not going to spare us your opinion. And you know that, Chris. In 2009 and 2010, a realtor came to town and bought some property on South 3rd Avenue. He was going to develop that property. We had an excellent, excellent mayor, Mark Hamilton. And he had the intelligence to see the picture that if that development was created, fire trucks would not be able to get into that development. That is my major, major concern. Delivery trucks and fire trucks and ambulances have not been mentioned. This lady that was just here is the only one that has ever mentioned anything about access for those vehicles in Original Town. I went to one of those planning commission meetings that was working on this project, and they're not going to like it. You can tell them they can cover their ears because the realtors had absolutely no intelligence whatsoever. If you're a realtor, you're supposed to be able to look at the real estate picture and see everything. That didn't happen at all with the planning commission reviewing this project. This issue should have never come to the state that it is now. Staff should have just nipped it in the bud right away and said, no, we can't close streets, we can't do this, we can't do that. You can't put you can't put signs up with weight limit signs because of the fact of the fire trucks and the ambulances. Now we have a resident in Original Town Superior that is 100% disabled, let alone any of the rest of us quote-unquote seniors that need the ambulance, right, Jim? Streets can be closed because you've got to have that. Streets are a service. Again, I repeat, service. And that you've got to have them. This is a civil rights violation of all residents in the town of Original Town of Superior, as far as considering any streets being closed in any way whatsoever at all. I did not fill out my questionnaire and send it back because I have an email that I sent Matt on August 17th, 2017. And I will read it to you. You need to review the scenario regarding closing streets. Can't do it to fire department access, and I will file an ADA action complaint, American Disability Action complaint. You need to cease any further activity regarding issue. This email will be copied for documentation with action. Now you can ask Matt. I've filed American Disability complaints against this town and won. I have 100% winnability. He and I just had to go around this spring about American Disability Act again. And these streets, considering closing them, is another opportunity for a complaint, and I will file one. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. I will also file, I'm waiting to see what happens with this activity before I file a complaint, ADA complaint, regarding the streetlight removal. That is a civil rights violation, and that is underneath the American Disabilities Act. And I will do it. And I will name the town, I will name Excel, and I will name the McCools. And I have no problem doing it whatsoever. You cannot close the streets whatever in this town.
Okay, I'm Penny Bender from 206 Maple Street. The way this town is put together, if somebody stops at the gas station before they go to Target or Costco, they have to go through town. There's no other way. So we see them all the time going down 2nd Street, stopping at Marshall Road, making U-turns, going around blocks, trying to figure out how to get out of town. So by closing any of these things, it's going to be harder for them to be able to get to our shopping centers. And that's our income. That's our tax dollars. So by closing these streets, we're closing our tax dollars.
Let's let some of the other residents come through, and then absolutely, we've got 30 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having regular transportation meetings. I know that some of these issues are not easy, and obviously it puts residents against residents in some situations, which is not easy as well. I appreciate the town inviting adjacent neighbors to talk about and weigh in on Coal Creek Drive. However, cut-through traffic to Superior Marketplace should not be lumped in with the other issues and concerns regarding Coal Creek Drive. There are town policies and direction that deal directly with this issue. There's a policy in the comprehensive plan, policy 4.5A, that states the town is to avoid pass-through out-of-neighborhood traffic through original town. It's very clear, it's in the comprehensive plan. It's been there since 2001. And all of that traffic, that 35%, is cutting through to the marketplace. And I appreciate that, yeah, we aren't getting those tax dollars, but there's other ways to get there, as you just pointed out, that you can get there different ways. And if we educate people and get them going other ways, we aren't putting 1,200, 1,400 cars in front of people's homes. We're not asking for, the other issue is, according to the 2014 Superior Roadway Design and Technical Criteria, 800 car trips per day is considered safe, livable, and a tolerable amount of traffic on a residential street. Coal Creek Drive far exceeds that number, and this is a Town of Superior document. We're not asking for special treatment or trying to upset neighbors. We're simply asking that the town follow the policies and guidelines currently on record and stop cut-through traffic to the marketplace. The other day, I was outside on the corner sitting with my 78-year-old neighbor. We were watching the continuous flow of cars driving down the street. At one point, he turned to me and he said, "You're right, they've ruined our quality of life. And there's nothing we can do about it. Please don't make this be true. Help restore some semblance of quality by choosing to act and stop the cut-through traffic. It's the right thing to do."
Daryl, do you mind if I ask what options up there that you preferred?
The restrict left turns, and I understand that we'll have to go up and around to get to Target, but really, do we want to continue to? It's one thing for people that don't live on Coal Creek Drive to weigh in on this, but they don't live there. They aren't experiencing the traffic and the volume, the noise level, the lights, the pollution, all of that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So I'm sorry if people might have to drive up to 76 and around, but it's always been part of the plan. Everybody has been talking about it on the comprehensive plan. So, restricting a left turn and making us drive up Coal Creek Drive and a little bit around is really not that much further. It's probably maybe a quarter of a mile at the end of the day.
Okay. What are your thoughts on speed humps?
I don't love them. I want solutions to limit the number of cars down Coal Creek Drive.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Alan Alper, 203 6th Avenue. So I'm in the Remington area, and so my neighbor who spoke, that's on the corner of 6th and Coal Creek, I would have to say that given that she sits in her office, whatever, 6, 8 number of hours per day, and sees what's happening, on that street, it does seem unusual that the speed that she's witnessing doesn't seem to have been captured, in whatever studies or whatever are done. So hard to say why that's the case, but I certainly would defer to what she's seeing on a daily, hourly, basis. The only thing I wanted to speak about really, though, was if that's to reduce that speed. In other words, if you can't reduce the number of cars, which I think would be nice, okay, but let's say you can't or those aren't reasonable. If you reduce the speed with speed bumps or speed humps, I had a friend that lived on 4th near Mapleton in Boulder, and they put speed bumps on 4th. I mean, a completely residential area. And what he recalled about it, I mean, he eventually moved. The minute you put the speed bump, you get the screeching of the tires, the people that didn't realize they were there, so they slam on the brakes, and now you get screeching tires. Then you got the people that don't see them and bump over them and scrape their cars on the thing. Then you get the people that slow down, go over them nicely, and then they gun their car to go afterward. So essentially, the way I see it, a speed bump is the worst situation, especially if you're looking at speed on one side and noise on the other. They're totally incompatible. And now the safety issue, I mean, I think, of course, needs to be, I guess, number one, we don't want kids, run over on their way across the street. Now, I personally, we walk an old geriatric dog across the street a couple of times a day, and people always seem pretty, pretty reasonable and polite, but that's twice a day. My neighbor sees everything, like I said, for 6-8 hours, and so I take her word for it. But again, speed bumps and noise, bad combination. I mean, to me, that's the least favorite option, and we were one that actually put that on our thing that said least favorite option.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
When we've been in Rock Creek for about 20 years now, and when we first moved there, Colton and Indiana, or Colton Road was really just 2 lanes, and at Indiana there was a stop sign. Widened it, then the stoplight went in. The first time I went to that intersection at the stoplight, I thought it was still a stop sign. I didn't even recognize the light. I stopped and then I went, but I realized that, I just ran a red light.
Yeah.
So my point is that when people, you mentioned on the speed humps, that 2/3 of the people would not see them there, and they would either screech on their brakes because they saw it at the last minute, or they didn't realize it was there and they just went over it and then they bottomed out or whatever. They do that once, they know it's there and they remember it next time. Now, the people who go over them slow and then speed up, that's a whole other issue that we'd have to resolve. I'm actually a proponent of the speed humps because for a couple of reasons. But those residents that run over them the first time, really too fast, they'll do it once and that's it. So
that's a fair, I mean, that's fair. I hadn't thought about the fact that it's the same, if this isn't the cut-through traffic.
It's not like people from Arvada or whatever going through there. These are residents of the town somewhere, and they do it once and they'll remember. 2/3 of them anyway.
Right.
The other question, when you leave your subdivision, and I assume you shop at Costco or Target or Office Max, when you leave, which way do you go?
It depends on which store,
Right.
but I personally prefer to go up to 76th rather than to go down to 4th. And so when you start talking about shutting things, if that would be helpful to keep the flow of traffic down, in other words, I mean, I put something out there, we did, and one of the neighbors said, "Oh yeah, but I want to be able to turn there because that's how I go to Boulder." And I thought, well, okay, how many times do you do that? And if there's a benefit to your neighbors, either for noise, speed, number of cars, or whatever, I'm willing to give up something to improve the quality, for my neighbors, even if it might mean that it would be a little more onerous on me, but that's just me.
Yeah. What was your name again? I'm sorry.
Alan Alper.
Alan. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jordan Kuffner, 7520 West Coal Creek Drive. So I have a problem with closing the road in any way, because cut-through traffic, everybody uses cut-through traffic once in a while. Everybody. It's a part of life. Nobody likes it. I don't like it. But it is a part of life that we all must deal with. And it's going to increase because of the amount of people. And there's really not much we can do about it. I don't like that they built houses right below me. I don't like that they built houses right beside me, but I can't do anything about that. I mean, it's wrong to try and limit people where they can, or try and tell people where they can and can't go. And I don't understand why we want to stop the cut-through traffic. I mean, it's 35% of the cars. If they're going to use Target, going to use anything, it's their right just like it's our right to use it. Everybody has a right to use a public road. It was never really designed to be a residential road. Coal Creek has been the main thoroughfare through original town of Superior since the dawn of time. And that's the easiest and best way to get into original town. Thank you.
To me again, Phil Kuffner, 7520 West Coal Creek Drive. I don't want to get too far off the base with what's going on here about closing the road, but a lot of these ideas are stemming from an agreement that Remington Homes made that was pressure put on them by town staff to not drive on a public road, to make it convenience for the people that did live here. Now they think you can put a sign up and dictate to people that pay taxes where they can and can't go. When did a cut-through citizen become what? Illegitimate? They live in the United States of America. They pay taxes. Every time they fill the car up with gas, a portion of that money goes to fix the roads that we use. So what makes them less of a person because they're cutting through? You live here. This is a part of your town, and you have the right to cut through wherever you want to go. Maybe you need to go back through the ordinance and fix the ordinance of how many cars, because you're never going to control the amount of cars that are on that road. Same thing with 36. I'm sure there's more cars on there than it was designed and built for. You go to California, they got 8-lane highways, and you have traffic jams. So this stems from Remington Homes making an agreement not to drive on a public road. I'm not going to make that agreement ever. I'm a contractor. They put signs in the middle of our road saying, no contractors allowed on Coal Creek Drive. I came down here, I addressed the town board. Nothing was done. They put a sign right in the middle where the firehouse is, and I know the legal limit of statutes. I'm a contractor. You need 8 foot to get an emergency vehicle around there, and there was not 8 foot on either side of that sign. I just don't want you to get carried away. Alex, a UPS truck is over 7,000 pounds. A 1-ton truck that you go down to Chevrolet and buy today is over 7,000 pounds. You just got to you're getting carried away with where you're going with this whole idea of blocking people. Why do you need to block people that want to take a left turn off of that street? If they don't like it here, they don't have to live here. They can buy a home in any other community. They can buy homes where you can't even drive by a street. So, I've lived here and I've drove on that road for 40 years. And I will just credit their comments. Every time I went down there and that sign was flashing, it was 25 miles an hour or under on the last one. We should have those numbers of the studies. You're sitting here and people are telling you they're going 50 miles down a road. I drive probably 8 or 9 times a day. I have never seen that one time. People driving that recklessly on Coal Creek Drive. Most of these people are friends of mine. I wave. They don't wave at me in Rock Creek, but they wave at me on Coal Creek. It's being distorted what's actually happening on that road. And who's defending the 400 people that use Coal Creek every day? Even if they are cut-through people. Somebody needs to defend their right to drive on that road to get to where they want to go. Whether they're visiting a friend, whether they're going to Target or Costco, that's none of our business. We have a road that is provided for people to drive on. And I don't know when it was designated road that would only handle 400 cars. I mean, all of our roads have more cars than they were designed to have on them. I have more traffic problem on this new roundabout because they close the right lane today, they open the left one tomorrow. I realize it's just growing pains of getting it open. There's more disconvenience there than there ever has been in 40 years driving on Coal Creek. I do not see the problem. I do not see the issue. I live on Coal Creek. I lived on 109 4th for 15 years. I just don't see, even those kids that she's talking about, I know those kids are there. Most of the residents here do. We slow down. Put an officer out there and write these people tickets that are going 50 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Now, I don't see where you guys are coming from, why you want to attack people that have paid for the right to use that public road. They pay taxes. They pay gas tax to improve those roads. Why are they bad people cut through people? Have you not ever went somewhere in your life and made a wrong right turn? Or went to Florida and went down a street that you didn't know was the street you were supposed to be on? What are you going to be classified as? Cut through? There's nothing wrong with a cut through person. They live in the United States and they pay taxes. They should have the right to use that road. Go back and fix how many people can drive on a road. It's a bad ordinance if she thinks only 400 people should drive on Coal Creek. What did you say?
So let me interject here before this might get out of control. Certainly not implying that anybody that cuts through there that is a bad person, because I'd be saying that I'm a bad person because I was guilty of it myself. And everybody in this room right now can see the challenge that we're all up against. Everybody in this room is a good, excellent resident of this town. But we have some very outspoken people on both sides. And both sides want something to be done or don't want anything to be done. And it puts town staff and the board in a very awkward position and a challenging position because we're friends with everybody that's in here right now. And I certainly want that to remain that way moving forward. It sounds like something has to be done so that we can have some friendships in this town. I think that we have to do something. Not that I think that anybody's a bad person because they cut through anything like that, but I just think that because the quality of life for some people has changed, and it may not for you, but we can't say that about others. Because there's going to be something that comes up later that you're going to say, I don't like this because it's changed my life. And somebody's going to say, well, I don't see how it could change your life. It hasn't changed mine. So I think that we have to be sensitive to everybody's position in this town. And I'm not saying that we're going to close all these streets. And it's certainly not the board that's saying that we've got to do something about this or that we don't like cut-through traffic. We're just reacting to what the residents are asking us to listen to. And I'm sure you can appreciate that we're in a very awkward position here. So before this kind of boils over into something that we don't want, can I ask a couple questions to some residents? Did you have some more comments that you wanted to add to this?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
You know, there's comments made up here about the trucks that are not 100% gone through. There are many trucks. What about these people in this new subdivision when they go to leave or sell their house? They can't bring a moving truck in there and get their furniture out?
It's a really good point. And these are, like I said earlier, these are some, and I always use this term, unintended consequences. These are some of the things that, okay, do we make it an ordinance or do we make it a policy of the town that you can't have trucks of certain sizes, but make that an exception and make it an exception for UPS trucks and fire trucks and plows and if a semi is your primary source of transportation, then that's off limits too. So those are the things that we need to be sensitive about. So this is why I direct this to you, that I'm sensitive to you guys about this because there's certain things that we would be deprived of if we made those kind of policies. So this is something that we have to tread lightly on.
Right. Well, and I agree. The same thing. You would have to change an ordinance. There's been comments about putting signs up restricting trucks. Boulder can do that because they're home rule. Boulder can do anything they want to, and there's not a lot that the residents can do about it.
Yeah.
Period. That's not the case here. And they did it anyway. Your town manager is the one that put that sign there and ordered it there.
Yeah.
on both ends of that. He did not care. I came down here and spoke about it. So I'm afraid I'm going to voice my opinion, just like we have voiced our opinion when we had people down here about the Rock Creek development. It started at 110 houses. And without the people coming down here and expressing their opinion, they would have got exactly what they wanted. And I think it's misleading when they're the ones that signed the deal to not use that road.
Yeah.
None of us have signed that deal. So I want to know you guys move forth with the right legal standing when you do these things, or have a board meeting and change that rule so that you can do those things.
Sure.
Just do it the proper way.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a question of the residents that that objected to the left turn on 4th? And I know that that's an inconvenience because that's an easier path to the marketplace for some. Would you be unwilling, or is it possible, I don't want to put you on the spot, and I apologize for this, but is there an opportunity that we do, like Trustee Lacey says, to try a temporary solution and just see if this works? If it's something that everybody could live with, that we put some temporary barrier on 4th so you can't make that left turn. If it doesn't work and if it's too inconvenient and it doesn't stop the cut through traffic, then we move it. But just try something that we think might reduce the amount of traffic into original town quite a bit without making it a permanent thing. I think that the speed humps, I mean, we've already learned that 20 to 50% of traffic will reduce by putting those in there. I think that's a good solution. It's an expensive one. But the residents that would object to the no left turn, let me know your thoughts. Would you mind coming up and...
Laurel Russell, 212 West Maple. I don't like the inconvenience of it. I do understand that there's a problem on Coal Creek Drive with traffic. Well, I have a lot of problems too with Marshall Road. The traffic is still going to go down Coal Creek, so I'm not really sure how that no left turn is going to work. I mean, maybe it will, maybe a temporary trial would work, I'm not sure, but there's still going to be all the traffic, there's going to be all the people in town, and I really wonder if it's going to deter that many people. I personally don't care for it, and I'd like to throw out another idea. How about making this a gated community, all of original town? Thank you.
Good evening, Rick Kupner, 411 West Charles. This is not a new issue, let's face the facts of life. This dates back years and years ago. Jenkins opened a clay pit up there at the end of Coal Creek Drive. Coal Creek Drive was hauling clay trucks, 18-wheelers down there in the 60s. And they'd come down through there 60 mile an hour sometimes. And they'd set their brakes, their jakes at 4th to slow down, to stop down here. The town put up a 25 mile an hour speed limit. That stopped a lot of them. So then they went out 76th Street and then around. But a left turn, no left turn lane there, it's going to block off the bank. I go to the bank about 3 times a day up there. I will change my banking. I'll move it over to Louisville again. You know, I won't shop at the mall up there. I'll go somewhere else that's easier. And the same thing, you close it off here, instead of me going to Safeway, I'll go across the road. So it's a double-edged sword for you guys. Maybe you ought to think about putting stop signs on every corner. If people got to stop 4 times or 5 before they get to 4th Avenue, maybe they might think about going up that street every day. And like I said, you know, it is a public right-of-way. We need to encourage people to go to the marketplace. Look, half of the places are empty over there. And so, I mean, we got to figure something out, but it's not trying to keep the people from going there. And that's all I can say is, you know, we just got to be careful what you do. I had the planning commission member sit up here one night when the Rogers property came before the board, a concept plan, and he got up here and says, "Oh, we want contact where we could go. They could come up this way through there instead of going out on the roundabout." What's that going to do if you put a street on 2nd Avenue there from the Rogers Farm into the original town if you do something with Coal Creek Drive. They're not going to be able to get up to the marketplace. So, I mean, and a lot of that traffic's going to come down through there unless they block that off on 2nd Street and make them go out around the roundabout. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so, the town is built in a funny position. We're kind of boxed in. And there's not much you can do. Maybe put stop signs. We got school buses. I'm a school bus driver. We got a school bus that comes down 76, picks kids up on 76 and Sycamore. Takes a left, comes down Sycamore, makes a right on 4th Avenue. Comes down to 4th, picks kids up at 4th and Coal Creek, leaves there, comes down through Coal Creek, and goes out up to Rock Creek. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you got to really be careful what we're doing. And I think the stop signs is the best thing. Alex, what is the data on stop signs? You got it for speed humps. Do you have it for?
As far as discouraging.
Discouraging traffic. What is the data on that?
It would be similar. Turn your mic
on.
Thank you, monitor.
Oh, damn it, nobody can hear you, Alex.
Thank you. I think that would be similar to speed humps that you'd have to slow down. With stop signs, when you have a lot of stop signs and people tend to, roll through or run through them after.
There he is, right there.
That's right. And so you don't like to put stop signs where they're not, situations where you don't expect them. Of course, a lot. We have 4-way intersections at 3rd and 1st that you could put them in. You could put them up at 6th and 8th. Again, they're inconvenience, and that's something that.
But it's a lot cheaper than putting speed bumps in, isn't it?
Sure is. Yeah.
Okay, think about that. Maybe start out with 3 of them or something.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vicki Kuffner, 7520 West Coal Creek Drive. And first thing I want to say is I've been driving Coal Creek Drive for 35 years. Moved out here when I first got married. I'd come up and down Coal Creek back when there was not even a stop sign, barely paved, 1 street light. So you could just kind of cruise, no big deal. But the town was tiny, right? There was no people. My suggestion at 6th, because I do drive down there, and for years and years and years, you just get on Coal Creek, your mind's going where you got to be, what you got to do, and I catch myself speeding over 25. Now the park's there and the subdivision's there. So I believe the best thing is to put the radar signs on each side, up and down, because that reminds the people coming out of Sagamore and myself, my husband, to slow down. There are kids here. There is a park here. There is a residence. There's dogs. There's elderly people walking. And it reminds you to do that. If you put a speed bump or a stop sign, that's bad for the environment. Every time a car has to stop or slow down and accelerate, it's polluting the air more. So that's not a good solution. But the blinking lights, when I've seen them up there, it helped remind me to slow down. So I believe that's the best solution for 6th right there. As far as closing 4th, if you close 4th or change 4th or make the turn, Daryl just said it herself, that forces more people up 6th, up Coal Creek and past 6th, and now those people are going to be more upset because now more traffic's coming up past them. So it's like you oil one squeaky wheel, and now you got another one squeaking, and pretty soon you run out of oil. Who's going to get the oil the next time around, right?
Do you think, though, that the people that are going down, turning left on 4th is cut through traffic to get to the marketplace, would they tend to then, if it was no left turn, and I'm not saying this is the suggestion, but I'm just asking the question, would people then say, well, it's just easier just to go to Marshall? People coming from Rock Creek, it's just easier to go to Marshall than to cut through, or do you really think they would go up 6th, up to 6th?
I think the issue about the gas station, for example, or even where you're talking, you're at the gas station, you have no option. You come out of that gas station, you have to go up McCaslin. And if you want to come up, now you're going to go shopping at the stores up there, you have to come right. There's no option but to come up Coal Creek Drive. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to be forced all the way up to 76. 76 has now become 1 lane for how many years it's been 2 lanes now to 1 lane with bike paths,
Mm.
which now create another issue because I almost killed a biker because I was taking a right on Sycamore and the biker's coming through. I didn't see him in my rearview mirror. So, I mean, that's a whole nother issue you could look at. You're getting more traffic up there past Sycamore, taking a right on 76, taking a right on Sycamore. You got all those bikes up there. So do you really solve anything that way?
Yeah.
But my other question is, what is cut through? Because I come up Coal Creek. My elderly parents, when they come to see me, they come up Coal Creek. They don't come up Marshall because it's dangerous. That street light is dangerous. They're elderly. My daughter and my grandbaby, they come up Coal Creek. Are they cut through traffic? Are they, because they're coming to see me? They don't live here, but is that Coal Creek or cut through, or should they take Marshall? And, so how do you determine what amount is cut through and what amount is actually people accessing and using and going to the park and going to the homes in original town? I mean, there's not really a way to survey or understand.
Well, I would definitely say that your kids, your grandkids coming to see you or anyone going to the park would not be considered cut through.
Right, but if
people from Rock Creek that are trying to get to the marketplace, they're using that as cut through because they
right,
might
but
perceive
my
it as
point
quicker.
is, how do you know who's who? Which you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. There's not a way to determine that. So if you come up Marshall, it's a danger. I don't go that way because it's more dangerous for me. How many times I've almost got hit by taking that left on Sycamore off of Marshall. It's much safer for me to come up Coal Creek and my family and my nieces and nephews and all of them that live up by me. So those are really my suggestions. Or I would like to understand better the cut through traffic, I guess.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Yep. Bob?
Bob McCool at 312 West Coal Creek Drive, and we may be the cause of all this problems. I don't know. Probably are. Somebody asked earlier, what's the problem? For us, a couple of our neighbors. Yes, we're dealing with a couple of our neighbors. This isn't the entire original town. We're sitting at an intersection with a house that was built in 1900. It's about 17 feet from the road. The road that was shifted towards our side back when they did the streetscape. It's not centered. And the volume of traffic just continues to climb. So you've got a house 17, 18 feet from the road, living room that's in the front of the house. Our homes don't have air conditioning. Number of them on Coal Creek Drive don't. So our windows are open. We open them at night to cool the house down, try to close them up during the day, just like any of us who don't have air conditioning. And we have a house that sits on dirt. We've done a remodel. We have a nice back half that's not. That feels really good, but the front house sits on dirt. That house moves. When trucks go by, it moves. What else to tell you? So we fix cracks. I mean, that's part of having a house that's not sitting on a solid foundation. But when I moved there were 6, 10, 15 cars a day. I'd be out there working in the front yard that you'd see. And I get it. I no issues with my neighbors and how they drive. That's not my concern at all. I can look at these people all day. They can look at me. They're courteous. Everybody I know that I see stops at stop signs. They're thoughtful. We don't have a speeding problem. Never had a speeding issue on Coal Creek from first up to stop sign. I know what's going on from Fourth because I do hear my share of people gunning it from the stop sign at Fourth and shooting up the highway or shooting up the. It's a long stretch. I complained about that stretch when we built it. I asked, and I think I was on the planning commission, can we do more bump outs and can we make it more like Coal Creek from McCaslin to Fourth? No, we need to, I don't know, it was decided to do it the way they did it. I don't know if closing Fourth is the right thing to do. I honestly have looked at this 4 to 6 hours, just staring at our neighborhood on Google Maps, just trying to think, gee, what could we do? Chris, I don't consider people coming into our town cut through traffic. I don't consider I don't even put a face on cut-through traffic. But we work in our yard. You guys have seen us. We've built a wall to help reduce the lights that are coming down 4th, because that volume is increased. And as we get into the winter hours, those lights increase more. And that's our primary living space that's sitting there. And it's very different. As far as rights to drive on roads, we design towns to prevent this from happening, right? That's what Rock Creek is. We have a couple issues, right? We got Waldona Way, we have 88th. We have a couple issues that didn't get done. They didn't get designed quite right, and we're trying to figure out how to fix them. An original town isn't 70 homes anymore. It's a lot more. And so, yeah, the traffic's going to be higher. And sometimes it's time to redesign and rethink. I don't want to inconvenience my neighbors. I really don't. That's not the goal. That's not what I'm shooting to do. We're just trying to figure out how to reduce the traffic at that intersection. I'm not a fan of speed bumps, but if you want to try it, let's try it. You know, my neighbors said it affects emergency vehicles. It slows them down. We do have a lot of elderly in town, and that population in our town is getting older. And you know, we see fire trucks and we see emergency vehicles coming in, and I wouldn't want to impact that or slow them down. But Rick, I appreciate the stop sign suggestion. We could maybe add 1 or 2 more stop signs. Maybe that'll discourage it. Nobody is sitting here saying we have to close 4th. I thought, in fact, the best thing I liked was the right turn only if we were going to do anything there, because you can still turn right out. And yes, it's an inconvenience, but you can turn right out. You can go to Whole Foods and you can turn left, and yes, you got to turn left again into Target. And I get that it's an inconvenience, and we're not going to really take care of everybody.
I hope I was clear that I wasn't condoning that we close 4th, but restrict the left
that was
turn.
an early discussion.
Oh,
It's been commented several times about closing 4th, and yes, I've probably said that. We're trying to figure out what to do. So the problem to my neighbors, less so to you, is that the volume's increased. The exhaust coming in our homes because our windows is open has increased. The noise has increased. The light pollution has increased. And we just want to see about getting that resolved. And I'm going to speak to the streetlight issue because an accusation was, or our name was brought up. And this is from my neighbors. I think you guys already know this. In January of this year, the streetlights changed. And they went to LEDs. And again, our front windows are open, so our blinds are down so that we can let air in. And I'm not kidding you, it's daylight, as bright as I've ever seen it. And our request to the town was, can you please fix the problem? We have daylight late at night in our yard and through our house. We did not ask for the street light to be taken down. That was not our request. Our request was to fix the problem. We offered, can you shield it? Can you change it? Can you put the damn softer lights that were in there before? Don't need to light a front yard in order to keep a stop sign lit. If you want to put a smaller street light in there to lighten up the stop sign right there, go for it. That wasn't our request. We didn't ask to have that street light taken out. That was Excel's only answer, and that was their call and their decision based on the complaint. So anyway, most of that was from my neighbors. I appreciate you taking a minute to listen.
Thank you, Bob.
Once again, Bob McLaren, 212 West Douglas in Superior, Old Town. I sat here for a couple hours and I listened to my neighbors and friends and about how they feel about this. And I just want to refresh everybody's memory. I served on the board in the 90s and was involved in the 3rd District when Rock Creek was formed. And I know how important it was for that to be a tax revenue to the town, because we knew at that time that building permits were not going to last forever. I got to believe that's still true today. I got to believe that the tax base from Costco is something that's very integral and very important to the budget of this town. And to limit access from the residents who support our taxes just doesn't make sense to me. And especially doing something long-term like radar signs or speed bumps or something that can't be reversed easily, spending a bunch of money on that, I don't get it. And I've listened to Gladys, and I understand her position. I've listened to everybody here. Everybody has their own position and understanding of what should be done. But I would suggest to you folks that if you're going to do something, signs might be the best answer, temporarily. Try it. I mean, we don't like seeing our rights go away. We don't want to see our way of life going away. But I understand safety. And if it reduces speed and it limits access, then maybe signs are the answer. At least they could be removed. Thank you.
I'm Ross Morgan from 305 West Coal Creek Drive at the corner of 3rd and Coal Creek. And I'm one of them that agrees with whoever said that I think Alex brought this up, that the main problem here seems not to be speeding, or maybe it was the sheriff, that it's the volume. And the volume down through original part of town is what really concerns me, since that's where I live, that's where my neighbors have their children that running back and forth across the street next door. And I wrote in a suggestion on the form that I turned in that raised crosswalks be used at stop sign locations. I don't see that listed in the other suggestions, other than at 6th and possibly at 8th, and which I think are fine locations to put those at. But I sit on the corner with my old 80-year-old friend just about every day around lunchtime, and we'll sit there for an hour and have lunch and count the cars that come up from towards Town Hall. They come from Town Hall up to our corner and make a right there on 4th. And I would bet you that 60% of them don't stop at the stop sign. And so I just thought, in the process of sitting there with him and mulling it over, and then the survey showed up and we filled it out together, that a raised crosswalk might be coupled with a stop sign, might be a way to get people to slow down and think about what they're doing. I've seen near accidents at that location where someone's going to make a U-turn and someone else runs the stop sign. I just want people to obey the traffic rules that exist, and hopefully be deterred at the same time from using our residential street as a cut through. So.
Thank you, Ross.
Hi, Suzanne Sawyer, Ratliff, 405 South 3rd Avenue. Well, I really appreciate this meeting, and I really appreciate my neighbors. And I think we've been through a lot together in this community, and I want to assure you, Chris, and anyone else who thinks about this, we do interesting things in Original Town, like we get together and we say, let's talk because I know we don't agree with each other. And we can maintain not agreeing with each other and still respect each other. So I want to say that's one of the things I like the best about living in Original Town and probably living in Superior. I think that we will work our way through our differences. And one of the things I did, by the way, vote for my number 1 was no change. I feel like I'm content with what is. And I might also say that I like the McCools very much, and I think they're wonderful citizens of this town, and I consider them friends. And Daryl and I, some time ago, came to the conclusion that we saw this differently, and I still stop and chat with her when she's out running and that kind of thing. So that works well for us. But I heard some things at this meeting tonight that I'm really concerned about. And the Remington homes, I'm very concerned to think of children crossing that street to the park and being in danger. And whether people are really speeding, and I suspect they are, or whether we just have children going across, not one person in this room is going to want to see a child injured or worse, killed. So I think the most important thing that I've heard here tonight is, what are we going to do there at 6th to make sure the children are safe? So that's now my number one thought. But I also suddenly came to this idea, and I love coming up with ideas that maybe aren't going to be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway because it just popped into my mind. I remember when we were so concerned about the safety issues between McCaslin and 4th, and all of that attractive stuff there with the flowers and everything now, and the trees and those little spots that go in and out for parking and everything. That was put in mainly for safety issues, for people walking and how that was going to go. And I just want to raise the thought that came to my mind. Have we reached a point where we now need to look at those safety issues between 4th and 76th? And could we put some sort of parallel construction to what we have and what we did? And I think it's helped a great deal, not only with safety issues, people walking and people being out, but I think it's also helped with the traffic. And I guess I would defer to those who know more about that, but has it helped speeding, and has it helped flow between, and I'll just say between McCaslin and 4th? Might we consider extending that all the way? It might be a pleasant thing to look at, too. Thanks.
I'm Robert Ludke. I live at 121 8th Avenue, and I've been sitting in the back of the room trying to pull in all of this information and kind of think through it. And I'd like to, I guess, respond first of all to your question about the left-hand turn on 4th and Sycamore and blocking that. My concern with doing that would be that it would simply increase the traffic going up to 76th Street and going through then in essence, the Coal Creek neighborhood in addition to the original town neighborhood. And so I think if that would be explored any further, then you're going to also need to think about what are you going to do to further control the volume and the speed of traffic going up from 4th Street to 76th Street. And I guess I have to ask the question maybe to you, Chris, in terms of why do you use that as a cut-through? Why do you use Coal Creek as a cut-through to get to Target or Costco or wherever it might be there? And the thing I want to raise is maybe something kind of out of the box in terms of, people basically don't like traffic lights because they have to sit and wait. As long as they're moving, regardless of the speed, they're comfortable. But if they have to stop at a traffic light, then they're going to figure out some other way so that they can just keep moving rather than stopping. So the question I have is there anything that can be done at the Marshall-McCaslin intersection to actually make it more convenient for folks who would be coming, for example, from Rock Creek to use that route as compared to making that left-hand turn on the Coal Creek and going up to 4th or going up to 76th. So that's the question I have for you guys.
Yeah. So I'll answer from personal experience. I used to be a cut-througher, but no longer.
Until tonight.
Until tonight. Tomorrow I'm cutting through there.
You've heard the comments. Yeah.
No, I think it was habit, And I don't know why I did it from the beginning, but I actually think it's easier to make the turn on Marshall now. I really do think it's easier and better. So I don't know why I started doing it to begin with. Maybe because I would come into town hall first and stop and get mail or whatever and then go up there. I don't know. But even today, like I said, I noticed myself sitting at the light to turn left, and I didn't go through there. And now it's kind of a habit that I go to Marshall and down, and I think it's just easier. So I couldn't tell you. I don't think it's any quicker. I really don't. Maybe some people think that it is because if you get caught at the left turn light, maybe you think you're going to be there forever, but it's really not any different. And I guess I also think that, I respect what some of the folks are saying here, that, even if it does take me longer, how much longer is it going to take me? 30 seconds, a minute longer, maybe at the most? And to me, that's...
But if you look at driving behavior in this day and age,
yeah,
okay, it's those seconds that count now. And it's a perception thing as compared to reality. I mean, it's no longer rational thinking.
Oh, I agree with that.
Okay, it's much more emotional thinking, and that's why I was saying and making the comment in terms of if people are moving, they feel comfortable. If they're stopped, they don't.
Yeah, I definitely think times are different, and that you're 100% correct there. And I really think we need to rethink the way that we live life here in Superior and not be so rushed. That doesn't mean that I won't use Coal Creek at some point or another to cut through it. There's going to be times that I will, but for the most part, it's just easier to go down Marshall.
Yeah.
And hopefully people are listening and they'll get that message. It really is easier.
And I think there's still the issue then in terms of from 4th to 76th in terms of the speed, particularly going through there. And that needs to be addressed.
No, I
However,
think the point that Suzanne made is, I wrote that down. That's a really good point, that we're talking about all these things, but what's most important, and I would say that's our kids in this town, and if we're not doing everything possible to protect them, that's where we should be thinking first, and then go from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We haven't heard from George.
George Kuffner, there's a couple of things that the man just said is right. If we do anything in Old Town, we're going to force more traffic by our new Remington homes. And up by us at 76th and West Coal Creek there. We get quite a bit of traffic up there anyway for that. But if you guys really want to make West Coal Creek safe, close it to bicyclists. And make them go on Sycamore. Make them go over there. Because when you put a car there, plus the bicycle, plus the parking, there's not a whole lot of room there, safety-wise or otherwise. So if you really want to do something good, make the bicycles go over to Sycamore.
Now,
they're out for a joyride anyway.
Are you serious about that?
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's not a joke. Absolutely. It's narrow to start with, and if you park, say like they're having a baseball game, you put cars on both sides. It's tight, and if a fire truck or an ambulance had to go through, she's really tight. You know what I'm saying is, it's just not wide enough for the cars, the parking, and a bicycle. There's not. So if you want to close, I'm close to bicycles. Make them go over. They use it anyway. But I guess I should talk about the truck issue, because that's what everybody seems to be up in arms about. We've been here 40 years. And everybody says, well, that's a residential street. For years and years, it was our main street and our only way to get up and down to our place of business. We've been using it for forever. My dad's drove truck forever. My uncle scrapped cars and hauled steel out. And we always come down West Coal Creek. That was it with the trucks. I don't exclusively work for the town of Superior. I do a lot of work for you guys. But I work for other contractors as well. And I talked to the town manager, and he'd appreciate it if I went around while I'm working for the town. And I see no problem in that, because you guys pay me by the hour. So every one of you people in this room is paying me go around. I can handle it. But when I work for Charlie McKay, or I go over to Best Way, and I work for a lot of different little guys here and there, I'm not going around. My trucks pay tax to be on that road. And there's no bridges for weight restrictions. And in reality, my 45 cents a gallon on that diesel that I pay to the federal government and the state, I get probably 5 miles to the gallon, so I spend a pretty healthy chunk in tax money. And it almost feels like I'm being discriminated against because there's basically, it's me and my dad, and my brother. There's 3 of us that still drive truck. But that's it. So you say, okay, we'll put a limit on the road. Okay, well, what about the U-Hauls going to the self-storage? They're over 7,000. A 1-ton truck with a camper on it weighs more than 7,000 pounds. FedEx, all those big vans weigh over 7,000 pounds. Empty, let alone what you put in them. And really, these people complain about my trucks. When we get a 3-foot snowstorm, you know who's going to scream first? The people that don't want them trucks on that road. Because them trucks is what keep them roads black. So it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
That's right.
But as far as the kids and safety, everybody says you speed. How can you stop a 55,000-pound truck if you're speeding at the stop signs? You go 2 blocks. Me, I'm serious. If you run the heck out of my truck, you might get 23, 24 miles an hour out of them 2 blocks. I mean, they're not race cars. They're trucks. And yeah, I'm aware of the kids. And I'm really particular about the kids around town and at the park. So I understand the safety and stuff, but I don't feel like I'm going 90 miles an hour down there. And if I had any fear at all of a kid running out in front of me, I couldn't stop. I wouldn't go that way anyway. But there's as many kids on 76th as there is on West Coal Creek. There's more kids in Sagamore than there is in Remington, in our old town here. I mean, if you don't believe me, come watch them load on the bus. And speaking of buses, that's another thing. A bus is a commercial vehicle. What are we going to tell the kids? Now you're going to walk up to 76th? Your parents are all going to take you to 76 because that's over 7,000 pounds. So when you say, okay, we're going to exempt them, we're going to exempt this, we're going to exempt that, all you got left is George. So you see what I'm seeing? It's everybody but you can use that road. And I don't feel that's right. I just don't. And me as a taxpayer, I mean, I work for the town and I get money from the town, but I also pay town taxes. So I help pay myself. And I like to do a lot of things, but the thing I like the least is paying tax. So if we can get people to come up here and buy and lower our taxes, bring them in by the railroad car. I mean, because save us money, make it more. I'd like to have more in my pocket so I can spend more over there. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, George. Yep.
Hi, I'm Bob Besson. I live at 214 6th Avenue and Coal Creek Crossing. Excuse me. Not to want to flog a dead horse, but my preference, number 11 here is mine. Can we try no-through traffic signs to just reduce the amount of traffic? That's got to be low-hanging fruit. And I would add to what Bob Lutke said about sitting in a traffic light. It's not the sitting in a traffic light. It's the sitting in a traffic light when there's no cars on the cross street. That's what drives me crazy. And that makes me, if the light is long and there's no reason to stop. So we could put a roundabout there. And we could put a roundabout at 4th and Coal Creek. Lots of roundabouts. They do it in Boulder. In small
That's
streets.
Right. They do.
15th and Pearl, or 15th and Pine.
Yeah.
Roundabout size. That doesn't solve through traffic. And I agree, cut-through traffic is a problem, so I would like to see signage saying no through traffic, and just see what it does. That's very easy. I do, when I go to Costco and Target, I go right by your house, sorry. I go down Coal Creek and make a left on 4th. I could certainly go around, but I'd rather not. But I'd be willing to keep the peace. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, Alex, your time to shine.
It's my turn to shine. It's up to you.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that?
No, I think there are a lot of valid comments. Obviously, this is a complex issue, and no easy solutions. So, I think the 6th and Cold Creek doing something there, either a rapid flashing or a raised crosswalk or a stop sign, one of those solutions there to make sure the